Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 educators in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with standards set by the Tennessee Department of Education. For more professional development videos, check out our website at cem.mtsu.edu.
Good morning and welcome to the ELL Collaborative coming from the Center for Educational Media in the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University. I want to welcome everybody in this room today as well as our participants online. I'd like to introduce Dr. Jana McLean. So Dr. McLean, she is our COE faculty liaison with the ELL Collaborative. Dr. McLean's had experience in working with English learners, and I will let her tell more about her background, but Dr. McLean is our expert in the field working here with us in the ELL Collaborative. So tell us about yourself, Dr. McLean.
So as I was walking in, Dr. Ridgely said, "These are your people, aren't they?" And I was like, "Yes, these are my people." And it's so good to see so many familiar faces. I am assistant professor in elementary and special education here at MTSU in the College of Education. I teach the diversity classes. Before doing this work here at MTSU, I was an elementary ESL specialist at Hobgood Elementary, right? Yay, Hobgood folks, right a couple of blocks over that way. I currently live in Warren County, so yay, Warren County folks. And in addition to my work with undergraduates, preparing undergraduates to become elementary teachers and work with diverse learners in the classroom, I also mentor doctoral students who are getting their PhD in literacy studies. So if any of you have ever thought, hey, I'd like to get my PhD, now is a great time to do so. We recently got a private foundation grant to essentially double the number of graduate assistantships that we can offer. So you can, if you are accepted, you can actually get paid to get your PhD. So if any of you are interested in that, please feel free to touch base with me during the breaks because we are recruiting wonderful people. I have a research lab that focuses exclusively on multilingual learners' literacy needs. So if that's something you're interested in, like I said, come talk with me. I love doing this work. I love being here with you all. I love that the model for the CEM is teachers supporting teachers, that we really do care about what's happening in your classrooms and how we can support your work and provide you with the training that can really, and the professional development and the knowledge that can help you do your work well. So thanks so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your expertise and for being willing to spend the Friday before Thanksgiving learning. I mean, you could be like watching movies and going to basketball games and partying in your schools like everyone else is. So the fact that you're here, ready to learn and eager to engage is awesome. So thanks so much.
You can take it. You can take it. Thank you, Dr. McLean. We're so glad you're here with us. All right, so I am ready to introduce Dr. Hannah Gribble. Dr. Gribble attended these sessions when she was an educator in Warren County. And so she's been a friend of ours for some time now, and now she is in the Tennessee Department of Education. So she knows the work on both sides and multiple sides, and so I'm happy to have you here. Thank you for your flexibility, your willingness to stretch some Q&A today and give an opportunity, not only for that, but on the ESL rule and policy today. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. So good morning. As Dr. Clark said, I used to teach ESL. I was in ESL, teaching elementary schools, ESL at K-5, from 2006 to 2021. So I did take 1 year off in there, but 14 years of being in the ESL classroom, just like you. Prior to that, I taught high school English for about 3 years. So y'all are my people. I've been in the trenches with you. We are going to talk today about ESL rule and policy because both of those were updated this summer. How many of you were at the Tennessee TESOL State Day? Okay, good number of you. Some of this is going to be a repeat, so I apologize in advance for that, but it also never hurts to hear things a couple of times, okay? So our agenda goes straight through the portions of ESL rule, straight down the latest updates. We are not going to spend a huge amount of time on every one of those, but we are going to hit some highlights for each section. So back when I first started ESL, I think we had ESL policy back then. I'm not really sure. Somewhere back then, we did have ESL policy 3.207. In 2021, that was changed and made into a state board rule. Since then, we've updated rule at least twice. Once because of the TISA funding and ILPs and Pulse, and once because we changed assessments this summer. So the difference in rule and policy, because we also now have policy again. So we're working with both. Before we had one, now we're working with both. In this latest update to rule, State Board asked us to put anything that had to do with a specific assessment vendor into policy. It's a little bit faster to change policy than it is to change rule. So in our policy, you will see things like cut scores or the eligibility scores for screening. Those are in policy. Those have to do specifically with our ELPA 21 assessment. Okay? In rule, everything else. When you are monitored, which I know y'all all love to see me coming. When you're monitored, you are basically assessed on how well your LEA, how well your schools are doing in regards to federal compliance, state board rule compliance, and then we also give corrections, okay? If you have something wrong that relates to a federal law, it's called a finding of noncompliance, it's red. You really gotta fix that. If you have something that is wrong that relates to a state board rule, it's a correction needed, it's orange, if you're used to the colors on monitoring. And you have to fix that. Typically, with a policy, we can only provide recommendations for improvement, and that's a yellow on your monitoring. The way that we wrote the state board rule this time, it references ESL policy. So if you're not following those cut scores, it'll still be a correction. Some of the classroom teachers are like, I don't know what you're talking about. Your Title III directors know that's more for them. Just know that policy is enforceable as much as rule is. Rule carries the weight of law. We added a couple of definitions. One of those being co-teaching. And if you've heard me any time in the last year, co-teaching is not push-in. Co-teaching is not push-in. We are not doing push-in. Okay? Co-teaching must have co-planning. So if you are co-teaching and you don't have any planning time with those teachers, you need to go back to your Title III director and your admin and say, I've got to have co-planning time. Okay, that's something I look for when I look at schedules. We also added the definition for pull-out instruction. We all pretty much know what that is. It's when you're taking an ESL student out of their content classroom to do ESL. Okay, the anti-discrimination policies and practices did not change. I do want to highlight a couple of things here. Yes, it is about anti-discrimination, but it also includes meaningful participation. That includes parent communication and parents who don't speak English as a first language having equal access to information through verified translations, okay, which is not machine generated, it's not AI generated. Those are not verified, those don't work. They don't meet federal level compliance. Okay. It includes things like your ESL students being allowed to participate equally in extracurricular activities. Could be clubs, could be sports, the drama club, any extracurriculars, as well as curricular activities. The last one there, I think we all know LEAs cannot deny enrollment to students. Most of you are not denying enrollment, but sometimes there are barriers to enrollment, and sometimes there's a chilling of enrollment that happens in the front office of your school building. So it's really important to train your secretaries, your registrars, whoever is entering students into your system. We don't ask for immigration status. You cannot require a birth certificate only. There are other ways to prove birth and other ways to prove age and other ways to prove that you live in that school zone. So it encompasses all those too. Our identification procedures changed just a little bit because now we have ELPA and we're using the ELPA 21 screener. Hopefully everybody is using that. I still see things that hopefully it's just paperwork that's not been updated, but I still see things saying the WAPT. I know that's hard to believe, but we see it and I'm like, that was 10 years ago at least. So make sure you've updated your policies and procedures and that they now say the ELPA 21 screener. As of July 1, we did not use WIDA. The home language survey is the first step. You know this. Please, please, please stop including the home language survey in the packet for new student enrollment. Because what is happening is Putnam County is getting a student from Cumberland County, and Alice is not doing this, it's just who I happen to look at. So let me preface with saying I know you're not doing this. Putnam's getting a student from Cumberland who's in 4th grade. The secretary or whoever at that front office gives that family the new student packet, which includes a home language survey. But that student already has one from Cumberland County. You've got to stop and try to get that original. I know that seems like a lot of legwork and a lot of paperwork, like hoops to jump through, because sometimes it's not easy to get that original, but this is why we're insisting on that. We have students who are moving from district to district whose answers change. I personally had a student one year, and my Title III director said, why didn't we test this student with WIDA? This was in like May. Why didn't we test this student? And I was like, I didn't know this kid was here. I go, look, she was with a foster family. Foster mom said, English, English, English. She was coded as ESL in a different district before she came to ours. People change those forms when they enroll in new schools. Sometimes the form looks different. Sometimes they're in a different family situation. This is why it's really important to try to track down that first one. If that home language survey has something other than English, if you know the family speaks another language, screen the student. If there's some sort of discrepancy, it is okay, and it's actually in our rule and in all the federal stuff, you can interview that family to get more information. All right, once you've got that home language survey, you have to screen within 30 calendar days and provide that parent notification within 30 calendar days if the student enrolls at the beginning of the school year. If they enroll in the middle of the school year, that goes down to 14 days. And I know that part is not in our state board rule. That's in federal with ESSA. Okay, that's where that comes from. So 30 days at the beginning of the year, 14 days in the middle of the year. ILPs. I will preface this with saying, I work in the federal programs division. I look at your ILPs for compliance. I have nothing to do with Pulse or the functionality. I'm just saying, I don't know, okay? In fact, the other day, because I'm monitoring, it's monitoring season right now, I looked at 3 different LEAs, uploads of ILPs, and I was like, it's not printing the career readiness section for your transition students. And some of the LEAs that I looked at their uploads recognized that and provided me screenshots, so thank you for that. The others maybe didn't even notice, I don't know. But I've let the team that does deal with Pulse know that's an issue. I've let our monitors know that's an issue. So we know the career readiness section is not printing. For transition students, it should be fine for your L's and W's. That's the only thing I have to do with ILPs, is look at compliance. So, you can see what's required. We did not change this part. If you had a student who was here last year, you do have a growth trajectory. If you have new students that were screened with ELPA 21, you don't. And you won't have one next year, because it takes our accountability division, I think, 2 years of data to get those growth scores. So you're not going to have those growth trajectories for some of your kids now and all of them next year, and that's okay.
Because we changed to ELP, is that what you're saying? Because that transition,
Yes,
it won't match
because
up?
there's no correlation. I have to repeat the question because of our audience. That's okay. She asked, is that because we changed assessments? And the answer to that is yes. There's no correlation between WIDA and ELPA 21 that we can say, oh, they scored this on WIDA and they scored this on ELPA 21, here's their growth. They're not compatible that way. Grade-specific ILP requirements did not change. For this and for your transition kids, I would say make sure that you're clicking the correct plan, because if you've got a 4th grader and you click on that K3 ILP, my understanding is that career readiness section doesn't pop up as an option because it's not required. So make sure you're clicking on the correct ILP. We tried to clarify the language around transitional student ILPs. That was confusing in the previous rule, so we called it out separately. They pretty much need almost everything that your regular ILPs have. Okay? They may not have recent WIDA data in there. They should, but they might not. They're not going to have TCAP accommodations on there. Okay, you're still going to have classroom scaffolds that you can select. You're still going to have short-term goals. They're going to be more academic than language. And then you do have to update that at least annually. Your quarterly monitoring does not have to be in Pulse. Okay, there's nothing in rule that says it has to be in Pulse. That's a district decision. Your district may want it in Pulse. That's up to your Title III director. But at least annually, you have to go in and update that ILP. Okay. Part of that is because you're changing grades. You may be changing plans from a K-3 to a 412, or from a 412 to a transition. Okay. That's part of that annual update. Your ILP oversight requirements. This is something every LEA has to have. All the ones I've looked at this year through monitoring have been really good. Okay, we did provide a template for that, an annotated version to kind of help your LEA walk through that. What does it look like? This is just so everybody in the LEA knows, here's how we're gonna do these. Who's responsible for creating that ILP? Who is managing the oversight to make sure those are created and they're correct? How are we going to involve parents? Some LEAs require parent signatures, some don't. Some LEAs require a whole team meeting, some don't. They communicate through email or, a quick meeting with the ESL teacher and the content teachers. Okay, some of that's very broad across the state. We talked about monitoring quarterly. Okay, our ESL services also did not change. Our elementary students still have to have an hour of service unless they qualify for tailored services. Our middle school and high school students have to have the equivalent of a class period of at least 45 minutes or a full hour. That equivalent of a full class period is important. If your ELA class is 65 minutes and your class periods are 65 minutes, you cannot do ESL for 45 and something else for the other 20. Okay, it has to be that class period equivalent. Parent notification. How many of you use the one in Pulse? Okay. You don't have to for compliance. Okay, my minimal knowledge about Tennessee Pulse is that you do have to do something with a parent notification in Pulse to create that ILP eligibility. So go with that if your system wants to. You've got to do that for funding. But your parent notification that you actually send home to families does not have to be in Pulse according to our rule. It does have to have all the requirements that are in rule. All those are in that letter from Pulse. So your LEA can decide what to do there. Your required training, the only thing that changed is that we changed assessments, so we changed standards. You do have to talk about the ELPA 21 standards. You do have to talk about and train your teachers on ESL scaffolds and instructional methods. They also need to know about second language acquisition. Okay, your BICS, your CALP. It takes 5 to 7 years. Here are the stages. That's what we're looking for when I look at your training. You have to talk about how teachers are going to collaborate on the ILP, and you have to talk about the ILP requirements. That can be in person, that can be through a video. Most of those who use videos have a quiz of some sort so that people actually have to pay attention to the video and not just play it and go decorate your bulletin board. You do need, if you're a Title III director, I would think about how you're going to deliver that training to your teachers who aren't there at the beginning of the year. So think about how your new people who graduate in December and start in January are going to get that training. Tailoring of services means students can have less than that required time. This year, it depends on our WIDA scores from last year. Has to be a 3.5 in reading, 3.5 in writing, and 3.5 in listening or speaking. Okay. Since it depends on the WIDA scores from last year, new students or kindergarten who were screened with ELPA 21 do not qualify for tailored services. It's always been that way. It's always been based on a summative assessment, not the screener. For next year, tailoring of services relies on the ELPA 21 assessment. They have to have at least a 4 or above in reading, a 4 or above in writing, and a 4 or above in either speaking or listening. Not going to harp too much on the ESL services because I feel like we talked about that a little bit at the beginning. You can have another model approved by the department. That does take a waiver request. You have to explain how that program model is effective and the research behind it. For ELs who may have a disability, they are entitled to that assessment, to that process. If needed, you do have to rule out language for that. If they qualify, they do have to have both services. Same thing with RTI. If you have a student who needs both services, they are required to have both services, which means that if you are doing your ESL block during your RTI block, the question we're going to ask if we monitor you is, okay, when are these ESL students who need RTI going to get RTI? So make sure you have that plan. I am not saying put your newcomers and every ESL kid that scores low on your universal screener into RTI. Okay, they do have to have enough language to access the intervention. Same thing for students with characteristics of dyslexia. ESL courses, you can see up there what's in rule. Raven is much better at explaining course codes than I am. We talked about the parent notification. One of the things in the parent notification is that you do have to give parents the option to waive services, and you do have to let them know that they can waive services at any time, which means a student who's been in ESL all year, Monday, their parents could waive services and you don't pull them anymore. Okay? Be very careful about this, and I said this at Tennessee TESOL. Be very careful about when you are reminding parents that they can waive services. It cannot be a staff member trying to get parents to waive. And we know it happens. I know it happens because scheduling is hard. Sometimes they need multiple services. A staff member cannot persuade parents one way or another. They can say, you have the right to waive services, but it's the parent's choice. So my warning there is sometimes we have very well-intentioned people who offer this waiving of services, again, at IEP meetings or at parent-teacher conferences because they know the schedule is hard. Sometimes we have classrooms who take kids out to recess during that ESL block, which is not right, and that's a whole different discussion. But when parents complain, my kid's not getting recess, sometimes we have people who say, well, you could waive services. That's not okay. So be careful about when you choose to bring this up again. It's in that parent notification letter. Just be careful about after that. Staffing ratios. I'm not going to get too into the weeds with this because we know a large portion of the state is out of ratio. because it's really hard to find ESL teachers, and we are getting more and more kids. So the ratio is 1 to 35. That's what you're supposed to have. That includes your L's, W's, 1s, and 2s. It is a district-wide ratio. So if you're a high school teacher, and I'm sorry about this, you may have more than those elementary ESL teachers. Part of it is the nature of your scheduling. Part of it is the number of students at those grade levels. So know that it's a district-wide ratio. If you are over ratio, and I think my Title III directors have heard this several times now, you are going to get a survey. All Title III directors will get a survey. We're meeting about it Monday, so it should be out right after Thanksgiving. That's going to ask you how many teachers you have, how many full-time equivalency teachers you have. Because we have some teachers who do, an hour of ESL during their planning period for a stipend. So they don't count as a full teacher, they count as a partial teacher. If you're a Title III director and you have questions, email me. But you will get a survey that asks you how many teachers, head count, and FTE. If you are over, it will be an email from me saying, hey, do you know that you're over ratio? What are your plans to fix that? Okay. Then it's a discussion. Here's your options. You could do a signing bonus. You could do a waiver. Oh, if this teacher graduating in December, January you'll be okay. It's a conversation. Okay. There's that waiver. I will note on there, I know that school designations are coming out today, so we know who our assisted targeted schools are, or you will at some point today. Rule says that if you have one of those schools, you cannot get an alternate staffing ratio waiver. What we have seen in the department is that if an LEA can show that that school, who is assisted targeted because of the EL subgroup, if that school is within ratio, we have seen waivers get passed as long as the LEA can show that that school is okay. Our exit process, we have different scores because we have a different assessment. ELPA 21 does not have a composite score, so that's something really new for us as a whole. But you can see those scores there. For the alt ELPA, they do have the modalities instead of domain-specific scores. So that exit is based on the modality scores. Transitional ELs, you have to monitor your T1s and T2s for at least 2 years. They have ILPs. Again, make sure you're clicking that correct ILP plan. And we know that the career readiness section is not printing on those. Your reclassification procedure. We did add parent consent in there. So make sure you've updated your procedures. Parent consent is something that's in federal for reclassification that we have not previously had in our ESL rule. So there's a note. If a student is exited by another state, that exit is good. Exit is different from not screening in. Okay. If they didn't screen in with a WIDA assessment, you have to screen them when they come to our state with ELPA 21. But if they exited, a true exit, and have documentation of exit from another state, that's good. Okay, there's my contact information should you need it. So I will open it up for questions with the caveat that I do not know about Pulse.
I have several questions from the chat.
Okay.
One is from Ginger. Previously, there was guidance that students who score below 2 composite on WIDA Access did not have enough language to access RTI. Will similar guidance be provided for ELPA 21?
No, because that guidance went away a long time ago. Because our students could be here for several years and be scoring low on access because they need the RTI. So there's not a cut score for that. It's a team decision on whether a student needs RTI and ESL.
Another question is for middle school. If related arts classes are 45 minutes and there is also a personalized learning class that is 45 minutes, does that mean having ESL services for 45 minutes would be acceptable?
It is supposed to be the same length, the equivalent of a core content class period. So no.
So no.
Unless the core classes, ELA, math, are 45 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Dr. Clark's coming around with a microphone.
So my question has to do with the home language survey.
Yes.
Why isn't there a uniform survey across the state if that's an issue that we're seeing? And is there a place where all of these are housed so if we have students moving from district to district that we can search that rather than that being in the new student entry forms?
So students who have another language, that home language survey should be in Pulse. We don't have a uniform one. We do have questions that we're required to ask, and that's from federal law. We don't have a uniform one because we try to let the districts be very autonomous in things like that. So I don't foresee us having a standard statewide home language survey. There are districts who include it on a carbon copy sheet. There are districts who include it in their Skyward registration or their Power School registration. It all looks different in those different platforms.
I guess my question is, I understand the purpose of autonomy, but with it being a federal thing and a state thing, I don't understand allowing that variability with something that we all are held accountable for.
The only thing that is state or federal about it are the required questions, not the format.
I'll just add while she's getting to the next person that there were a couple of comments in the online chat thread too that they have trouble getting the home language survey even within the same district sometimes, and sometimes taking the records gets more than 14 days. So it sounds like that's sort of backing up what this person is saying about how that the records can be difficult sometimes.
It is, and we know that. That is where we need your help. We need you to make sure that your registrars, your secretaries, whoever has the keeping, per se, of that survey is getting that to the next district quickly. If you cannot get it, rule says that you can do another one, mark it as secondary, and then if you get the original, destroy the secondary to retain that original.
Yes, I have a question about scheduling high school students. So the 45 minutes, if there are other classes offered at that time, such as calculus, that they are receiving credit for, then we are okay on the 45 minutes? Mm-hmm. If it's year-long 45 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
But it has to be that class period. That's what's important, is that block of class period.
Yeah, it's the whole class period.
All right, while the microphones are getting adjusted, another question from online. Would the state be able to provide a training resource for us to use when training our teachers? It would be great to have something that we know covers all the bases.
The short answer to that is no, and this is why. Again, it goes back to that district autonomy, but also part of that training is specific to your LEA. it doesn't make sense for us at the state to say, here's our program, and it's not going to fit each district's option or even each school's option. The strategies for collaboration, that's going to depend on your school. That may even depend teacher to teacher within your school. So that's going to look very different across the state. And it is the responsibility of the LEA.
So back to your home language form.
Yes.
If we get we fill out the secondary one, and then we get the first one, and it's got different answers.
Go with the first one. Yep, the original is the one you should always go with. Yes.
Hey, I have a ELPA 21 specific question. We have a couple of students who are duly identified. They're on the alternate diploma track, and they've actually already graduated. They're in their 13th, 14th year, but they're staying with us until they're 22. Do those students need to sit for the ELPA 21 exam?
My understanding is no, because technically they've already graduated. If you'll email that to me, I have that answer somewhere in my email, and if not, I will find it. I think the answer we were given was no.
Cool, thank you.
Another question for online while the microphones are being passed over. Is there a specific way we need to monitor students who've already exited?
No, that's up to the LEA. I would check things like classroom assessments, teacher anecdotal notes, grades, multiple pieces of data. I feel like are always better than just one thing or just one opinion.
So my question is about time as well, and I think these are related. I'm thinking about tailored services and also co-teaching. So if in fact a ELL teacher is co-teaching and I'm in a middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th, and devises a schedule that we stick to that allows some students to have a tailored time system, but also other grades to have at least 5 hours a week. Is that an option? Is it total time or daily time?
It is daily time.
Thank you. Okay, thanks for the clarification.
It's written in rule as daily.
My question has to do with the screening. So you said their initial enrollment, if it's at the beginning of the year, we have 30 calendar days. What constitutes the middle of the year where we have that 14-day? Is it after December? Is that the actual true middle, or is it any time after August?
So that's a good question, and that's something we've actually asked our legal team, because I was like, it's not defined. So the guidance we have been giving is that, let's say, for ease, that your school year starts on August 1st, okay? I would call any time between August 1st and August 30th beginning of the year. That 30-day time slot, I would use that as my chunk of beginning of the year. And then after that, because the way that it's worded in federal is students who enroll after the beginning of the year. It doesn't say anything about middle. It doesn't even say a number of days after the beginning of the year. It just says after the beginning of the year. So what we've been saying to kind of keep it uniform across the state is to take those first 30 days as your beginning of the year.
Okay, to follow up with that then, if students are transferring from district to district and they already have screener scores within our state, if we don't get records before then, are we screening again? Does that make sense?
You shouldn't. And sometimes...
I guess how would we know not to is my question.
Right. Your Title III directors, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe there's a way for y'all to look up students in Pulse, possibly?
We can't see it until they're transferred.
Okay. Sometimes that's an email to the other school or even a phone call to the other school just to say, hey, and it works better if you're asking ESL teacher to ESL teacher. Was this student screened? Did they qualify? And that way you know while you're waiting on those records.
So is there a way, or with ELPA 21, where that is, like, if they're screened within the state, that there's a way for us to just access that in general, or?
Yes, my understanding is yes. I don't know that part. Nancy Williams does all the ESL assessment. She's on the assessment team. So anything specific to ELPA 21 that doesn't relate to rule and compliance, I would ask Nancy, but I do believe ELPA 21 has a database where you can put in the student state ID. That's part of the reason it's really important to make sure you have that student state ID when you screen the student, is because it all goes into a database.
So would your advice be for us to start with checking ELPA 21 when students are enrolling after that initial 30 days to see if we need to screen?
Yes.
Thank you.
And then following up to that, a phone call to the previous school.
I'm wondering, back when we had access, students loved to have the goals of what they were going to do, and it was a high motivation in my classroom. And so now switching over to ELPA, I'm a bit confused on like how to translate that language to them on what their goals should be, but I want that investment still that we had before. So I was just looking if you had any recommendations on that.
My recommendation on that would be to ask Nancy Williams.
Okay, perfect.
Because she's going to know more about those scale scores and how that's scored. Yeah. So to follow up on that, there are a total of 4 of us at the department who work on ESL. We're divided among 3 divisions at the department. I'm in federal programs. So my job is your federal funding. I check your budgets for federal money, not TISA, but federal. I work on your compliance and your monitoring. I write policies and procedures to go with rule. Okay. Nancy Williams does all the assessment piece for ELPA 21, TCAP if you're looking at accommodations or unique accommodations or exempting a domain. That's where Nancy works. That's her work stream. Joanne and Raven are on the student support team. Joanne manages Raven, who does the ESL student support. She manages the person who does the RTI and dyslexia. Joanne is your pulse person. Raven does the instructional programming. So that's kind of how we're divided. If you email one of us and it's not our work stream, we'll usually just forward it to the other person or copy the other person on it so you can get the right person to answer. Yes?
I had a question about the transition students' career questions, not printing out, and you said something about they're doing screenshots and putting them with those ILPs.
So, yes, go ahead, finish, sorry.
Is that something you want us to do currently?
So, when you are monitored, there's this really big thing you have to do in ePlan. Our monitoring instrument has lots of different sections. One of the requirements is to upload ILPs so that we can see a sample of that. If you are being monitored and you haven't completed your instrument yet or haven't uploaded those ILPs yet, feel free to take screenshots and upload that with it. But if you're not being monitored, I would not worry about that.
Okay, and for one of those as well, I had where the can-dos weren't showing up.
Yes.
So I had to just write those in.
Yes, and
because,
that's fine.
Okay.
That's fine. We also know there's been an issue with the present levels not populating. That's fine.
We have a question from the chat. What do we do at the high school level when a student must be enrolled in classes, including ESL classes, but we can't screen until the EIS number is created? We cannot screen an enrollment, so they are either placed in ESL classes without screening or placed in non-ESL classes and moved around a week or so later.
We can't place kids in ESL classes before screening. That is, for lack of better terms, profiling based on either appearance or what have you. So it would be better to put them in non-ESL classes and then move them to that ESL class. If you have a situation where you know you have co-teaching going on, that's the path I would go with that.
Okay, 2 questions. Do you think tailored screening will ever be an option for kindergartners?
No.
Okay. Best time to pull elementary kids. You're looking at monitoring. We've got lots of different things going on based on what the school's needs are or what they think they are. What are you, when you're looking at monitoring, what is your favorite or best 1 hour pull time?
It's hard to know because it's hard to know that school schedule at the same time. I look at the schedule. If you have a Bell schedule, I look to see if those times match. I look at those student schedules to see what they're missing. Are they getting 15 minutes of math and then being pulled for ESL? That's not so great. You know, if I always pulled, I'm trying to like back up and think what I did. I always pulled during the intervention block. If students also needed intervention or special ed, I had to work with those teachers to find other times, either for my services or for their services. It typically worked out that I pulled during the intervention block. RTI usually pulled at a different time. Maybe it was at the end of their ELA block when they were doing centers or more small group things and not new instruction. If that student needed reading RTI, that was a good time. Same thing for special ed. Often they would pull at the end of one of those blocks based on student need, as long as no new instruction was being taught. Does that help?
Yes, because my concern is missing core instruction. And intervention is like, oh, that's the answer. But then you've got all the kiddos who also need intervention. And so if we pull from intervention, then their intervention pulls from core, which then again comes back to I'm trying not to schedule kids for, to miss core instruction. The dream world is all ELs get all core instruction plus their hour of service time. And the intervention block allows for that if it's an hour and they don't also qualify for intervention.
And I would look very deep into if those students need that intervention. Lots of times in elementary school, they're not necessarily behind due to just being behind. Lots of times it's the language more than the skills. Yes.
Well, I think you probably answered kind of the RTI question. Elementary school, it's really challenging. I'm at a huge elementary school, and especially now with RTI, and then also having to do the tutoring that is required of the classroom teachers. And if I have some that do need both, how do you manage all of that to get them what they need in the 7-hour day that you can't pull from math, specialties, lunch, recess? That what is a suggestion that it would happen?
I think that's one place where if there is the possibility of co-teaching, I would try that. Because co-teaching does take the co-planning, but it allows you some flexibility in the schedule to meet the needs of students who have multiple needs.
Okay, then I do have a question. I have second grade, I have 7. They're in 4 different classes. I can't co-teach in 4 different classes, or the specific class. So that's the other challenge, is that, they're all spread out.
That might be a situation for putting those students together. For that portion, your teachers are going to have a fit because they're going to say, who's the teacher of record? Okay, I know that. But if we look at what's best for kids, it's best for those kids to have all their needs met. And if that means shifting them all into this one ELA block where you can co-teach, and then they go back to their homeroom teacher for the rest of the day, that's okay. And sometimes that takes an administrator or a Title III director stepping in and saying, I know you're worried about teacher of record. It's better for those kids to have all their needs met. There's a greater chance of them doing well in the assessment if all their needs are met in that simple but not so simple way. Let's not worry about teacher of record.
Yes, and that happens in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, is that they don't want all of the kids in their room because they don't want all those scores attached to them, especially if it's newcomer,
And I would not do that for an entire day because that would be grouping kids, and we know we can't do that. But if you're already grouping those kids for your ESL class. So if you're grouping them for that time slot of co-teaching, similar circumstance.
I have a quick question from online.
Yes.
If a student is screened in a non-ELPA 21 state and has received services for 3 years, do we screen again with ELPA 21 when they come to Tennessee?
Yes.
Yes.
And that's not our decision. We are monitored by ESL, just like you guys are monitored by TDOE. And when we were monitored in 2021, that was one of the things they told us we had to fix, is that if students come from other states who aren't using the same assessment we're using, we have to rescreen them.